Hello. This is Andre Battles. I want to say good morning and happy Sabbath to you. And what is the Sabbath? It is Saturday, today, right? Exodus chapter 20, verse 8 through 11 says, Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days thou shalt labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God, and in it thou shalt not do any work. Thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. So happy Sabbath. We'll talk more about that later. My life, 360 turnaround. You know, wow, I'm 41 years old, and some of you have wondered about my life and my story. Some of you have wondered as to who I am. Now, if you're watching on Andre I Battle Daily Battles, just the regular Facebook profile, you probably ain't worried because hardly any of you watch what I post on that page. But if you're watching on the End of Days page, thousands of you have asked questions. Over 50,000 of you are following that page, and I give God the glory for that. And I just want to let you know who I am. I was born in Dallas, Texas. To be technical or to be accurate, really, it was Fort Worth, Texas, about 35 miles outside of Dallas in 1983. And I am born to a Lafayne Battles and a Kefi Battles. Those are my parents. And my mother is a native of the island of the Bahamas. And so it was interesting growing up because my dad is an American man, born in Nebraska, raised in Texas. And life was interesting, okay? I'm not going to go into any details about certain things. What I will say is that in my life, I have struggled. I grew up with parents that were trying to find their way. And as a child, I felt as if I was not treated the way I needed to be treated. There was not always the best relationship between me and my dad. And I felt it. There were times where there was some abusive situations taking place. There were times when verbal abuse or physical abuse had taken place in my youth, and it affected me in such a way that I came up believing that I was not valuable, that I was not loved. And see, what happens is that when you are dealt with this particular situation or are treated like this, you begin to start thinking that your value depends on what you do, how well you do it, and not who you are and whose you are. Okay? Often when people treat us wrong, and let me be clear here, maybe your parents were struggling themselves in their lives. Maybe your parents were struggling or your guardian, and you may not even had parents. You may have been bouncing around through foster homes. You may have bounced around from aunt to uncle or whoever, and you were mistreated. And then you became angry and you felt this angry spirit over you as a result of how you were treated. I understand. What I want you to know, and something that you perhaps have never thought of, is that your parents may have went through things as well. Your guardians may have been molested, just like you were. Your guardians may have been abused physically and verbally, just like you. And although it's not an excuse for their behavior, you learn to be graceful and merciful with everybody you come in contact with, especially your parents, when you have noticed that the way you were treated wasn't the best. Well, that was what I dealt with as a child, and I remember stumbling upon pornography very early in my life. I was about 7 years old, 9 years old, somewhere around there. And it did a number on me. Pornography was, for me, an outlet, an escape. And interestingly enough, I didn't lose my virginity until I was 21. However, long before I had ever had intercourse with a woman, I was undressing them in my mind. I was having fantasies about women, my school teachers, classmates, things of that nature. And it was because I stumbled upon the pornography that it just opened up Pandora's box. It started me off on that particular path. You know, a lot of pastors don't want to talk about those things. I guess it's embarrassing. And as far as I'm concerned, it's who I am. It's my life. It's my experience. And in order to help someone else, I figured that it would be wise of me to share what I've gone through so that someone else can hear my testimony and be transformed as a result of it, right? Well, that pornography did a number on me. I experimented with my siblings. I have 4 younger sisters whom I experimented with. No, we never had sex, praise God, but there were things that were done. And you know, when you think about, and they weren't necessarily the willing parties. Let me make that clear. So I don't want to destroy their image. We were young kids and they were not necessarily willing. I was very curious and one thing would lead to an next. And so I would experiment with the closest things to me, which were my sisters. That's just the truth. I'm not ashamed about that. I don't feel no kind of way about it. I feel like I've been forgiven for it. I feel like I've talked to my sisters and we have a great relationship to this day. But for those of you out there who are still hiding behind the fact that you perhaps have done the same, I'm helping you to come out of the closet, okay, by sharing my story with you. And after with the porn and after the fondling of my sisters, I had cousins that would fondle me. Some in the Bahamas, some in America. We would touch each other in sexual situations. And I remember often thinking to myself that this felt good, but I knew deep in my conscience that this wasn't right. Well, you know, because we are empty on the inside, due to maybe the way we were treated as children, because we were empty, because of the way that we felt like we weren't loved or appreciated or accepted. So we just kind of reinforced the habits and the addictions that we found. And I reinforced that addiction of pornography with masturbation. I was a young boy. I think the first time I masturbated, I was 10. And I remember the feeling that came over me, and I was just like, oh, that felt so good. I mean, I remember that feeling. And although the feeling was one that I wanted and I perpetuated throughout my life, the thought of it was not always comfortable. The thoughts that came along with it was not always thoughts of comfort and peace, because I knew it was wrong. And nobody had to tell me that it was wrong. I knew it was wrong because it was something that I had to do in hiding. I couldn't do it out in the open. Anything that you've got to hide, you should know that it's wrong. If it's a relationship that you're hiding, you know it's wrong. If it's something that you only say around certain crowds but not everybody else, you know it's wrong. And that's what I felt like with this masturbation. I knew it was wrong, but it felt so good. Well, as I got older, there was a neighbor across the street in the Bahamas where I lived. And she was a beautiful girl. She's still very beautiful to this day. And I remember I liked her a lot. In fact, I had a crush on her mom too. And I would go over there just to play with her brother because me and her brother were real tight. This was in the mid 90s. So about 96, 97, and 98 was when these particular incidents took place. And I would go across the street and I would play with her younger brother, who was about 2 or 3 years younger than me. And we would play Nintendo 64. How many of you remember that? We used to play Wave Race, Killer Instinct, all the time. And then across the street from their house was a basketball court. And I can remember many summers where me and her brother and some of his cousins would play basketball all day in the heat. These were some happy moments or memories in my mind. One day I went over there to visit my friend, the young lady's brother, and the young lady greeted me at the door. And immediately she started kissing me. And I was like, oh, okay, like, where'd this come from? We had never talked about our interest in one another, although I did like her. She never told me that she was interested in me. And in fact, the way she played was hard to get, so I didn't think she even thought I was cute. And so when I opened the door, oh, she got to kissing me. And I remember after kissing me for a lengthy period, my penis started getting hard. I mean, that's what happens, right? And she started reaching her hand in my pants and started grabbing on me. Then she led me upstairs. There was a section of her home that her parents were adding on to the house. And it was still in construction at the time. I'll never forget that. And we went into one of the lots or plots that was going to be a window. There's a 2-story building, and she dropped her clothes and she bent over in front of me. And I remember looking at this young lady like, whoa, like, I mean, it was a shock to me, number one. It felt good, but I'm going to tell you another reason why I know God is in my life. For some reason, I couldn't do it. All this pornography I'd been watching, all this masturbating I had been participating in, I could not have sex with her. And that somewhat destroyed a friendship because I guess she felt like I was rejecting her. And so for many years after that, she never talked to me. We somewhat talk every now and then now. She's back in the Bahamas. I'm still here, or I'm here in America. But that relationship was never the same. Okay? And that's how I know, one way I know that God called me, because he wouldn't allow me to do something that I knew that would have caused problems. Because had I had sex with her that day, we were both very fertile. I'm 41. I would have a son that's at least 25 right now if I had went that direction. So, I stop and I think about how God always comes in. Now, you may be saying, well, I had sex and God loves me too. And amen. Yes, he does. You may be saying, well, I was molested and I love God. I'm not saying that God loves me just because he didn't allow me to have sex. I'm saying that it would have destroyed me if I had done what I had done or was trying to do or wanted to do that particular day. I zipped up my pants and I left. I was 15. And nowadays, oh, please. For the most part, we losing our virginities at 13, 14, 15 years old. Because that's the culture. The culture is showing us sex everywhere. It's in the music, it's in the movies, it's everywhere. It's on our phones, on our tablets, and our computers. It's on Instagram, TikTok. Sex is everywhere. Facebook, YouTube. You can go to YouTube and type in certain things and you can see women basically naked. You can see women with no top. You can see women with no bottom dancing and shaking their booties and all this kind of stuff. Boom, 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 boom. And I'm just like, what? Because sex is everywhere. Well, in 1998, my parents, I remember Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls had just won their final championship. I was a huge Chicago Bulls fan. And naturally, I was born in Texas, so I liked the Dallas Cowboys as well. And in 1998, my mom and my sisters and my dad left and went to Texas, and I requested that they leave me in the Bahamas, which they did, I think reluctantly. And when they left me there, I was there with my grandparents, my mom's parents, who are both now deceased. May they rest in peace. And while there in the Bahamas, I was starting to take liberties. At 14, 15 years old, my grandmother had a very good friend who is still alive today, Sister Culmer. Sister Culmer in the Bahamas would come and pick up my grandmother, and they would go to prayer meeting together Wednesday nights. To this day, my grandmother still owned, well, if she was alive, she would own it. The car is still there, I should say. A, a Volkswagen Jetta. And she would leave and go to church with Sister Colma and leave the keys for the car at the house. I don't know what my grandmother was thinking, but I know what I was. And I was thinking mischief. And I had a cousin that lived right around the corner, Delano. And these names are definitely different from the names that you are regular or used to as Americans, if you're watching this in America, or maybe even any other country. Sister Culmer and Delano. Those are interesting names. But anyway, my cousin Delano and a couple of other friends that we had, well, we decided to get in some trouble. And I took that car, my grandmother's car, while she was at prayer meeting, and we went on a spin. I was very proficient and forward, and I was always adept to things. And it was nothing but the grace of God I didn't wreck that car. In the Bahamas, they drive on the left-hand side of the road, whereas here in America, we drive on the right side of the road. And, I remember taking it for a spin. I didn't go very far, but I'm quite sure because I was always bigger than my size, really. And what I mean by that is at 14, I looked like I was in my 20s. So nobody questioned, unless they would have looked dead close in my face and they could tell he was young. But my size was like that of a real big man. So nobody bothered us. And we only did that stunt. We only pulled that stunt once. We didn't do that very often. Or in fact, we never did it again. And my grandmother came home and she never knew about it. To this day, I never did say anything. She's dead now. But I was a thief growing up. Okay. I was a thief. I was a pyromaniac. I would steal stuff, and I like to burn fires too. As a kid, I'd burn fires in the house, and had gotten in trouble for it many times. And my grandmother, the deceased Rosita Miller, back in the Bahamas, she would hide money in different places. Why? I don't know. And even if I do know or I had an inclination, I wouldn't say. But I'm going to say that she hid money in the telephone book. You remember back in the day, the telephone book was that big, that thick, and she would hide money in it. And I remember going in that telephone book one day, just being curious, and I didn't know she was hiding money in it. I was just a curious person. I always have been. Like, let me see what's in the phone book. Oh, $50. It was a $50 bill. I know, I'll never forget it. Well, I was in the third grade, maybe at the time. I took that $50 bill to school, and there was in the Bahamas, you got to understand, things are different there. So if I explain this, you may not fully understand it, or if I say this, you may not understand it, but right behind the school, right behind the campus, there was a fence, and that fence was ripped out, a hole was ripped through it. And that fence, when you walked or jumped through that hole, you would be standing in front of a little corner store. So over the years, I'm sure the students would rip through that fence so they can get to the corner store without detection. Because if you went through the front gate of the school, they'd see you, you get in trouble. So somebody ripped a hole through that little gate or that fence, and you would be able to go to this little corner store, get your snacks, your chips, your drinks, and then sneak back into the schoolyard. And so I would sneak out of that gate and I would go to the schoolyard. I was young. I was always self-aware, a very self-aware. Like at a young age, I would do stuff that kids older than me weren't doing because I was very self-aware. It's an anointing. I didn't understand that then, but I know that now. And so, but I wasn't sure how to manage that anointing as a child. And sometimes I don't manage it the right way now as an adult. Well, anyway, I climbed through that hole in the fence, and I went into this corner store. And I was always a Santa Claus. My grandfather, the late Percy Miller, who I lived with, him and his wife, my grandmother, he was a giving man. I never met a man more giving in my life than him. If I know of one, I might be the only one. And I don't want to toot my own horn. I'm a giving person. I love to give. And so I went to the store with that $50. I bought me a bottle of cologne. Now I'm 10 years old. What do I know? What do I need cologne for? I bought a bottle of cologne. I bought some chips and I bought a bunch of toys for me and the kids in school. And I brought them in, and that's how I got caught, because my grandmother started doing her investigation as to where this money went. And I lied, of course. I said I didn't know anything about this money. And so she went around and asked the teachers if they had noticed any strange behavior. And the teacher was like, well, yeah, he was quite generous the other day. We don't know where he got all this stuff from, but he had given out a lot of stuff, like Santa Claus. And that's how I got caught. And I remember, having to fess up eventually. But stealing was my thing. My dad had a purse of rare coins. Well, I don't think I have to go any further into that. He no longer has a purse of rare coins, and that's just the truth. I stole. I was a thief, right? I always felt like I had to secure for myself happiness because people in my life weren't giving it to me. So I felt like I had to steal. I felt like I had to take what I wanted. Just like masturbating was me taking the joy that I wasn't given into my own hands, literally, and making it do what I wanted it to do. Right? And we moved to Texas in 1998. I was tall, 6'4", and at that time I was nearly 300 pounds. And I remember that my sisters had come before. If you remember, I said that my sisters and my mom and my dad left me in the Bahamas. But one day, while I'm in the Bahamas, the phone rang, and this was before caller ID. I picked up the phone and I said, hello. And the voice on the other line said, who you having sex with? Huh? It was my mom. She was in Texas. And I guess because of just intuition and discernment, I mean, I am her son. She must have thought that, well, maybe this is around that time where Andre would be doing this. And she was almost right, because this is around the time my neighbor across the street was trying to get me out of my clothes. However, I didn't lose my virginity, like I said, till I was 21. But when I picked up the phone and my mom said that, she said to me, you're coming home. Home is where I am, Texas. Oh, I didn't want to do that. I was having a good time in Texas, in the Bahamas. But when I look back at it right now, I realized that saved my life, because my grandparents were getting up in age. They wouldn't have been able to keep up with me. Like I said, I was always a progressive thinking person. I would always do a lot of crazy stuff. I would always get into trouble, and I would have had 10 children by now had I stayed in the Bahamas, because as a yellow African-American person, yellow-skinned, there are not that many of us there. So you were almost like a commodity. And I used to get a lot of attention. Although I never felt that I was attractive, but I would notice women looking at me and smiling with me. And I guess now I realize that if I wanted, I could have pursued that person because they were cutting up with me. Well, my mom said, you coming home to Texas with us. And so she purchased a plane ticket. And I think it may have been 2 weeks later, I was on my way to Texas in my Hawaiian shirt. I'll never forget it. I did not want to go to Texas. I didn't really want to be around my dad. And I already explained to you some of the things that happened with me. I didn't go into detail about what happened with me and my dad. I just said that we didn't have a good relationship. And so, when I got to school in America, my sisters had already been there. And I remember one day I went looking around the campus just to kind of get myself acclimated with the campus. I didn't know where I was, and I wanted to kind of get myself familiar. And a teacher who I didn't know was a teacher at the time, he stopped me and he said, excuse me, sir, can I help you find your kids? That's how big I was. I was 15. That just gives you an idea of how big I was. I looked like a grown man. And this man looked at me and said, can I help you find your kids? And I looked at him. I said, huh? I said, I'm a student here. What? He grabbed me and signed me up for football. And I played football for about a year. I was never a very aggressive person physically. I'm not a fighter, I'm a lover. So to me, you have to have a certain killer instinct in order to play sports well. And I just never had it. I'm not that guy. You know, I like sports. Don't get it twisted. But I'd rather sit down and have a conversation, get to know somebody. That was who I was, and I didn't see how it made sense to be so aggressive for a game. Now I know people make millions of dollars, but it just wasn't for me. Okay, I remember we went to Disney World as a student at this particular school where I became a football player, and we got picked to be uh, in, I guess if you want to say like an alumni game, some all stars or whatever you want to call it. I did well, but it wasn't for me. It just wasn't what I wanted to do. And I was a diabetic growing up, so as a diabetic, I quickly realized that I couldn't do what everyone else was doing. I woke up one morning and I couldn't see anything. I was almost completely blind. We went to the hospital because I felt like I just needed glasses. But the nurse saved my life when she said, well, I think you do need glasses, but let's take you upstairs to get your blood sugar checked just before I send you home with these blurry eyes. And it saved my life. Because when we went to the doctor upstairs or to the main hospital, they checked my blood sugar and my blood sugar was 969. See, food was a crutch for me too. And I would eat my way through depression. I was eating all day long. I'd go in the kitchen and fry up egg sandwiches, four pieces of bread on one sandwich, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, bowls of cereal with a bunch of sugar in it. I'd pour up milk and pour sugar in the milk. I mean, I was eating my way through whatever struggles I was experiencing, and I could have died. As in fact, when I walked into that hospital and they checked my blood sugar, the doctor said, you should be in a coma, Andre. I was 14 at the time. You should be in a coma. How are you not dead? Is what they asked me. They marveled. And there's nothing but God. They marveled over the fact that I was still alive. So when I got to Texas and I started playing football, I was now physically active, and so I lost a lot of the weight that I had on me. And to add to it, the symptoms of diabetes went away. And I'm proud to say that for 20 years, I have not taken any diabetic medication, no shots. And at one time, I used to have to take needles. I don't take shots, no pills, no nothing. Diabetes is not hereditary. Diabetes is a lifestyle disease. If you change your lifestyle, you can reverse diabetes. And I'm living proof. Okay, so played football, didn't like it. We moved around a lot with my parents in between the Bahamas, America, and all over America, Texas, Atlanta, Florida. And I want to fast forward a little bit because I'll have you here all day. I'm going to say this. We're at 28 minutes. This message is going to be 40 minutes. So in about 10 minutes, we're going to end. So I'll just let you know what to expect. If you got other things to do, you can come back and listen later when you have a chance to. But we moved to Florida when I was 17. I didn't really want to move because I love Dallas. Dallas is my favorite place in the world. Dallas, Arlington, Texas area is my favorite place. And so I didn't want to leave and move to Florida. But really, when we got to Florida, I realized just how much I wouldn't want to leave Florida a year later when we were leaving and moving back to Texas. Yeah, we moved a lot. We lived in Florida for just 1 year. And while there, I fell in love with a young lady. I'm not going to call her name. She was actually a little young, older than I. I was 17. She was about 22. And she had a baby. And she was a chocolate-skinned sister. And the baby was yellow like me. I mean, yellow. And so that, of course, that means that the dad was a yellow guy. And I was at church one Sabbath where this young lady showed up, and she had the baby, and I wasn't interested in her at all. I didn't even feel like I thought she was cute. I just wanted to play with her baby. I love kids. Look, I love children. I have two daughters of my own. One is 15, the other is 10. Now I'm married now to my second wife, and she has a son that's 27, so that kind of gives you an idea of her age. She's not old. However, the window is really, really almost closed for her to have more children. But I'm believing in God that we are going to have a son. I truly believe that God is going to bless us. He's going to bless her womb and my genitals to produce a son. I truly believe that. And so when I asked the young lady at church that day if I could play with her son, she said sure. And not me not knowing, I was naive. She started looking at me like, he's fine. And he likes kids. Now I was only 17, but I had lost all of that fat. I was slim. I was probably the most confident in my look at any time in my life at that time. Okay? Because I was very shy. I had very low self-esteem. And I guess she started looking at me like, oh, he's a nice looking guy and he likes babies. And so I remember every Sabbath I would go and ask her if I could hold her son. She was there on vacation with her sister, spending the summer with her sister. So she was there the whole summer, 3 months. And I remember we would have these basketball games at the church on Saturday night. Just a little bit of R&R, a little bit of recreation, I guess. And we would go. My dad used to play. And I didn't play on the team because, again, like I said, it ain't all that to me. Sports ain't all that. They have to be dribbling and doing these crossovers just to beat you to the hoop. It wasn't that big of a deal for me. So I didn't play. And so I remember the young lady would come to, she'd come to the gym. And one night I said, hey, how are you doing? And she said, I'm doing okay, Andre. She had big bosoms. Okay, I remember that. And she was very slender. And I remember she grabbed me and she pulled me over to the side of the building. I'm like, what's going on? What's going on? Just like the first girl across the street from my grandparents' house, the Bahamas, she was taking what she wanted. This girl was about to take what she wanted from me. And she started tonguing me down. And woo, girl, boy, I fell in love. It was about, let's see. Actually, I have to back up. There was a young lady before her in the Bahamas that I was kissing on, was my first kiss, not the neighbor across the street. We never actually kissed. We kissed, we skipped all the kissing and went all to that fondling and touching. And I said I didn't have sex with her. But the first woman I ever kissed is another Bahamian woman who's still there right now. And I remember we were at a basketball game one Saturday night too, which is ironic. And she pulled me to the side and she kissed me. And I fell in love with her. Now, that relationship ended because my mom and my aunt shut that down because the young lady was a student at the school that I was at, and my aunt was a teacher there. So my mother was like, who's this young lady Andre writing letters to? Because my mother used to shake my room. She'd go through my room to see what's in there. And that's what all parents should do. Find out what your kid's doing in your house. Don't just let them just be up in your house thinking that they could do whatever they want with no repercussions, with no consequences. No, my mama used to shake my bedroom. And when she shook it, she found this letter that I wrote to the first girl that I ever kissed, and she broke that up. But then, fast forwarded back to where we were, the young lady in Florida, she pulled me to the side around the building, and she tongued me down, and I fell in love. And but I knew that if my mother didn't approve of the other girl in the Bahamas, who was also a older classman. I was in the 8th grade at the time. This girl was in the 10th grade. That she definitely wouldn't approve of this girl. I was in the 11th grade at this point, and she was grown. She was not even in school. So I knew my mother wouldn't approve of that. So I had to keep it on the hush. Don't say nothing. Right? And so I had to finagle that because I fell deeply in love, or at least lust. I didn't know what love really was at that time in my life. And I fell for what I thought was love. And I had to hide it. And so I started doing some stuff. There was a young man at the church who was about the age of the girl I was talking to. He had his own vehicle. And so I started getting smart. I told y'all I was always a very progressive thinking person. I had to outsmart my mama. So I called the fellow who had the car because I didn't have a car, and I said, "Hey, bro, would you mind taking us all out to go bowling one Saturday night? I've got some friends that want to go out." And the young lady that I was interested in was really the main focus. But because I didn't want my mama to know I was going to pick her up, I told my mama that I was picking up another young lady who I was not interested in, who I knew was interested in me, that my mother approved of. I was always thinking ahead. And it all worked. I was in heaven. I remember he picked us up. He had a minivan, and he picked us all up, and we went bowling. I had a curfew. Of course, I was still only 17, but I made sure that he picked up the young lady that I was interested in last. And when he picked her up, we're sitting in the van, in the back of the van together. Oh man, all the butterflies are floating around my head. And then I tell you, the devil is so busy because we went bowling and I'm just falling in love. And back at that time, I remember that song Jay-Z had, "Hey Poppy, doom, do, 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 doom, doom, do, do." If you remember that song, I used to love that song back in that time. That one had just come out. This was the year 2000. And it was from the uh, Nutty Professor soundtrack. The second one, the second Nutty Professor. And I remember that I have a deep memory too. I remember little details like that from 24 years ago that most people are like, "What? You remember that?" Well, that's just how my mind works. And so we got in the van after we bowled because we need to get back home. And so I was feeling it. I wanted to go the distance. We're going the distance. I wanted to go the distance, right? And so I told the friend, like, "Look, I know my mama didn't want me to be home at a certain time. But hey, I'm out here. This may be the last time I get to do this. Let's go to the beach." Because we lived in Florida. We lived about 30 miles from Miami. So we were close to the coast. And so he drove to the beach, and me and the young lady are holding hands. Now I ditched the girl who I knew liked me, the one who was the decoy, and I feel bad about that. To this day, I do. But it is what it is. It is what I did. And I was interested in the other young lady, but little did I know that this was going to destroy me. And I said I was going to stop this message at 40 minutes. Nah, I lied. I'm just going to keep going. I'm feeling this. And so hit the share button. If you got to go, just go. So I remember we got to the beach, we started holding hands and we started talking and, kissing some more. And oh man, you talk about the butterflies. You give me butterflies. You remember that song by Michael Jackson? I mean, I was I was in another level of joy at this point. But I knew in the back of my head that this was all going to end because she was leaving to go back to New York where she lived. And that's where the rubber would finally hit the road, right? But when we left the beach that night, we got back in the car. I'm a big R&B person. I used to be. Let me make that clear. I love music, but I only listen to gospel music and inspirational music today. I don't have time for all that other stuff. But as we were driving back to the house to drop everybody off, Bebo Bryson, "If ever you're in my arms again, this time I'll love you forever," came on the radio. And I was like, how appropriate. She's about to leave. This was her last couple of days in Florida. The devil set it all up. And I have to say that because it's the truth, right? Because I was in love, and then all of these things are happening to make me think like this is divine. Like, why would that song come on the radio right now? And it's just interesting that 24 years later, I still remember all of this, right? And so we dropped her off. They dropped me off. I was working at Taco Bell at the time. I was 17. I was making roughly about $200 a week after taxes. Every 2 weeks, sorry. Every 2 weeks, sorry. We got paid every 2 weeks, so I'd bring home about $200 every 2 weeks. And she had 1 day left in Florida before her and the baby left to go back to New York. And the job where I worked, Taco Bell, was about half a mile away from my house, and I would ride my bike there. She didn't have a car. She was visiting with her sister, and she lived almost 15 miles away from where I lived. And I wanted to see her badly. I wanted to see her deeply. I wanted so badly to get with her and give her my virginity. That's really what I was trying to do. But it wasn't like just a jump off and just, a piece of meat. I wanted to make love and then be in love and stay in love at 17. That's what I wanted. She was everything in my mind. Everything. Do y'all hear me? So I rode my bike to Taco Bell. I lied to my parents and told them I had to work. And I rode my bike, I'm 17, to work, parked my bike behind the Taco Bell sign that, where you order your food at, in the bushes. Laid it down and put some stuff over it so that nobody'd see it and steal it, because I loved my bike. I was a big, avid bike rider. And I called a cab. This was 2020, 2000. This was the year 2000. Y'all gonna make me lose my mind. Up in here, that had just come out, DMX. And he was my favorite rapper. And so I called a cab. I sat inside Taco Bell waiting for the cab, and they came. There's an Arabic fella. And he jumps in the cab. I get in the back, and we go. And so, he starts this small talk. Hey, brother, what's going on? And I was always the open book. Always talk so much. Notice I didn't say talk too much. There's no such thing. I just talked so much. And he asked me, he said, where are you going? And I gave him the address. And he said, oh, that's pretty far. And I could tell in his eyes he knew he was going to make some money. And so he said, what are you going to do when you get there? And I said, well, I got a girlfriend, and she's about to go back home to New York. And I want to say goodbye. And I'm just going to spend a little time with her. He reached over to the glove box and popped open the glove box and pulled out a condom. You're going to need one of these, my friend. I'll never forget that, man. I was 17. And I looked at him and I kind of smiled, but I was nervous because I was still a virgin. Right? I didn't know anything about sex. Although I had seen a lot of sex on videos and porn magazines, and I had masturbated a lot, I didn't know anything about actually having sex. So we get there, he parks, and I'm like, okay, guy, do I call you when I'm ready? He knew he was about to make a whole lot of money, so he said, no, I'll wait outside. And he waited, which I only got maybe 30 minutes to 45 minutes with this young lady. Okay, because if he waited, that means he knew he was making money, but he wasn't going to wait forever. And because he was going to make some other monies that day. And so I went into the house, I kissed her, I greeted the little boy. Her sister was at work, her brother-in-law was at work. And I'm nervous. I remember what I was wearing. Just how deep my mind was. I had on sweatpants and a black t-shirt. And I had on some white Converse with a yellow stripe through them. I remember those things. And I walked in just not knowing what to expect. But when she kissed me, she didn't kiss me like she used to kiss me. And I immediately sensed it, like, okay, that something's not right. But I was so in love that naivety settled in. So she's like, well, Andre, what do you want? It was very strange. And like, what do you mean what I want? I want to see you. I love you. Oh, I was head over heels. I would make $200 every 2 weeks in my paycheck, and I would give her half of it. Okay? That's just the kind of person that I am. Always been that way. I will give you the underwear off of my backside. That's just the kind of person I am. And so I remember she's like, well, Andre, I'm not going to have sex with you. I didn't even ask, which was shocking because that's what I came there for, but I didn't ask for it. And you just let me know right out the gate, we're not having sex. And in my mind, I'm like, why not? You said you love me. I love you. I'm giving you my paycheck. I'm doing all these things. I'm buying your. Her son was 9 months old, maybe at the time. I would go to the store and buy him Air Jordans. I never bought myself a pair of Air Jordans. And I bought this little baby size Air Jordans. I've never to this day, at 41 years of life, bought a pair of Jordans for myself. Never. And really don't care. It's not that big of a deal to me. I mean, I like them, but $250, $300, $400, please. You better go get you some Stacey Adams and get ready to go to church. You know what I'm saying? That's the way I look at that. Because I can't wear Jordans everywhere. And why am I going to pay an arm and a leg for a pair of Jordans that I can only wear in one or two situations? A barbecue and at the basketball court. Come on, that don't make sense to me. So anyway, I was disappointed. I was dejected. I felt some kind of way about that. And in my heart, in my mind, I was like, okay, well, maybe this ain't gonna happen. Maybe she don't really love me. Because remember, I used to associate love with how I was treated. And I remember thinking to myself, well, okay, so what are we gonna do? Young lady, I almost called her name. I would never do that. Like, what are we gonna do? We're not gonna have sex. You barely want to kiss me because when you kissed me, you kind of smacked me on the side of my lip, and then you turn around. And I'm gonna explain to you guys here in a minute why she did what she did. So stick around. And she ordered a pizza, Domino's. I hate Domino's to this day. If it ain't Pizza Hut, I don't want it. All right, straight up. And she ordered that pizza, and I reluctantly ate it. I remember just sitting there. You know, when you have that knot in your stomach, like you're expecting something bad to happen, you can't even be happy for the things that would normally make you happy. And pizza always made me happy, but I couldn't be happy because part of me was like, "You're leaving," and then the extra part of me was like, "And now you're acting funny." So what's going on? Well, that 35 minutes was up. The cab driver knocked on the door and was like, hey, I got to go. And I jumped back in his cab and I was crying the whole way back. I was 17. I was crying the whole way back. And I guess the emotions are kind of coming over me now. All this years later, and I've been divorced once already. And all these emotions come flooding over me. Because when you go through something, when you love somebody, when you care about somebody, and they do you the way that this young lady did me, and I ain't talking about the fact that she didn't have sex with me, but when you took my money, when you took my gifts, you were leading me on a string because what she knew was that she had a man back in New York, the father of that child. I didn't know that. And I was playing the dummy. I was playing the fool. And I ended up paying that cab driver $100 for that ride. All of my paycheck, pretty much. And I didn't get anything out of it like I was looking for, at least as far as I felt. Like it didn't end up working out in my favor. That was the summertime of 2000. We kept dating. I'm gonna fast forward. I missed her like crazy. I mean, I would call her every day. Back in the day, if you are older than 37, you may remember this. In the early 2000s, there was this free 1-800 number you could dial called Tell Me, and you could get free minutes for like 3 or 4 minutes international calling. And when you dial the number, it would come on a chime and say, Tell me. And then you would dial the number that you wanted to dial, and you would get like 3 or 4 minutes for free. Because remember, back then it was really cell phones that just started coming out, and you were still paying absorbent prices for long distance calling. It ain't like today where you can just pick up the cell phone and call somebody on WhatsApp in Africa and pay the same price. Okay, and so used to use it, Tia. You said all the time. I don't know if that's what you meant, but anyway, I would call her on this little Tell Me application, just telling her how much I missed her and how much I loved her. And I remember Christmas of 2000 rolled around. We were traveling to Orlando, Florida to visit my dad's family and celebrate Christmas with them. And I remember I got up early that morning. I was excited. Christmas has always been my favorite holiday, hands down. Thanksgiving, please. Christmas. It seems like everybody's happy during Christmas time. It seems that everybody's just in a good spirit. And so I remember that I got up early that morning because I was excited, and I called my girlfriend at the time. And when I called, the phone rang twice, and then I heard this voice say, "Hello." What? Hello? Where is so and so? Hold on. If you call somebody at 6 o'clock in the morning, you thought that person was your mate, and the opposite sex answers the phone, they didn't just come visit them that morning. They slept there. So he gives her the phone, my girlfriend at the time. And she gets on the phone and she says to me, "Andre, it's too blankety blank blank early for this." Click, and she hung up the phone. Ooh, when I tell you that the feelings that came over me, when I tell you that the feelings that came over me, you could have just, you might as well at that point put a gun to my head and shot me. I remember it's a 3-hour drive from Miami to Orlando. We lived near Miami. From Miami to Orlando, where my cousins were, who we were spending the holidays with that year, it was a 3-hour drive. My eyes were not dry, not one of those 3 hours that we were driving to see my cousins. And I was in a daze. I was like, what just happened? Who's this guy that just answered the phone? I was naive, still a virgin, still very green. So I didn't understand what was happening. Although I know full well right now, she was doing the dirty. She was living a double life. I was never something very special to her. The truth is that she saw my vulnerability, and she saw how I was so willing to invest in her and her son. So she wanted to hold on to it while she still played the field, hoping that one day she would mature, and then, as a result of her maturity, then decide to treat me right, right? And I remember when we got back home to Miami, another 3 hours back, I checked the voicemail on the house phones. You remember back in the day, that's how we got messages. And she left a message, of course. "Hey, Battles family, I just want to wish you guys a Merry Christmas." What? Please. You're cheating on me, and now you want to try and cover it up? You don't even tell me what's going on? That was the beginning of the end in my mind. Although I still loved her, and I still would reach out and call and talk to her, I started withdrawing myself. I started pulling away because I saw what was happening. We moved back to Texas in 2001. So we stayed in Florida for just 1 year. We moved back to Texas. And at this point, I was tired of moving up and down all over the place. And so I decided that I was going to get my GED and I was going to go to college. And really, it was a way for me to escape my parents. Okay. And that's just the truth. I was tired. I just tired of moving so much. And so when we got back to Texas, I got my GED. I was in 11th grade, so I've never been to the 12th grade. I skipped the entire 12th grade year and I went straight to college. And that's where I think the desire to really, really, really start working for the Lord came into my heart fully. It was always there. But at the age of 18, I began to find out that this was what I wanted to do. And that is use my mouth to talk about the Lord and to encourage people. And so I remember that I was trying to figure out which college to go to. My mother went to Southwestern Adventist University. She was summoned there by my late grandfather, her father. And when I was trying to figure out where to go to school, I started preaching because at the church that we attended in Dallas, Texas, City Temple Seventh-day Adventist Church, they had asked me to preach for Youth Day. And I did. I remember the name of the sermon was At the Buzzer. And back then I used to write my sermon. I don't do that now. I speak from my heart. Now I'll study what scriptures I want to share, but then I just go in and the Spirit speaks through me. But I remember that sermon because I wrote it. And I remember after I preached, a gentleman by the name of Reggie Dupard, he was a former running back for the New England Patriots back in the 90s, so you may not remember him. He was a member of the church at that time, and he said, Brother Battles, you're going to college and you're going to be a preacher. I remember he told me that. And I already knew in my heart that that was what I was supposed to do anyway, so it was like confirmation. And so I said, well, praise the Lord. I said, well, God is going to have to supply because I didn't come from a wealthy family. And back then, 24 years ago, college was like $7,000, $8,000 a semester. And I know it's an arm and a leg now. And so I just said to him, well, if that's the Lord's will, he's going to have to show me. And then he was like, Andre, we're going to help you go to Oakwood College. It's a college in Huntsville, Alabama, which ironically is right up the street from where I live now. And he said, we're going to help pay your way through there. And I said, wow, okay, cool. And I got to praying around that time. I've always prayed. Even when I was doing wrong, even when I was snorting cocaine, even when I was smoking weed, even when I was having sex with other women that I wasn't married to while married to my ex-wife, I would be praying because I knew I was in error and that if I didn't pray, where would the help come from to stop? And so long before all that other stuff I just mentioned, I was praying. And I remember I would go to church by myself. I had a 1993 Nissan Altima that my parents were selling me. And I would go to Wednesday night prayer meeting by myself. I didn't need a chaperone. Nowadays, folk in their 30s and they need a chaperone to take them to church. I was 18 going to church by myself because I knew that's where I should be. And I'm not perfect, please understand, because you're about to hear a lot of my story if you stick around. But I do remember that I went to church, and as I was going to church, I got this inclination in my spirit to pray to God for a sign that if it was his will for me to go to Oakwood College, that he would show me something with the name Oakwood on it. I prayed that prayer. I went to church. A week later, I was going back to prayer meeting on Wednesday by myself. And I remember on my way home, I heard a voice in my head saying, look to your left. I'm driving, so I look to my left. And as I'm driving past, I see this sign that said, Oakwood. I said, yes, Jesus, you answered my prayer. Woohoo! And right as I was about to pass that sign, and the sign was about to be in my rearview where I wouldn't be able to see it, the voice said, "Look again." And I looked again, and the sign said, "Oakwood Cemetery." Ooh. Right then I knew that couldn't be good. Because remember, I prayed that if it was God's will that I go to Oakwood, that He would show me something with the word Oakwood on it. But see, God speaks to you if you pay attention. And He showed me what I asked for, but He gave me a little extra, and that is, don't go to Oakwood. Because why would He send me someplace that is to be a blessing and use the terminology or the reality of death to send me to a place where I should be entering into new life? Oh, I'm a thinking person. Trust me and believe that. So when I saw that sign say Oakwood Cemetery, that was the end of that. I decided I'm not going to Oakwood. But I didn't know where I would go. So I prayed. I said, Lord, I need your guidance because I don't know where to go and I don't have any money. And He sent me some help. A gentleman in Keene, Texas, where Southwestern Adventist University is, who knew my mom, called my mother around the same time to tell you how God works in mysterious ways. I had been praying. My folks live on an acre of property where they were then and at this point when I was praying at the age of 18. And I remember when I prayed this prayer, there was a tree in the backyard right beyond the property line that is huge now, but it was just growing at that time, 23 years ago. And I would go stand in front of that tree and pray and ask God for guidance. And around the same time, this gentleman called my mom and said, "Don't you have a son who's college age?" Sure enough. And he says to her, "Why don't you send him to Southwestern Adventist University?" And so I got interested in the fact that, wow, I was just praying, and now here's this guy calling and saying that I should come and check it out. So I did. I arrived on campus with a pair of Jordans that my mother bought. Because like I said, I've never bought a pair of Jordans. My mom bought these Jordans for me. Some And-One shorts and a white t-shirt. That's all I came with. And I was a week early. I came to try out for the basketball team, which was the initial reason why I came. It's a 3.5-hour drive from my mom's house to where this college is. And remember, this is the college my mother went to when she was a youth back in the 80s. And that's where she met my dad. My dad grew up in this town. So we get there. I try out for the team. I didn't make the team because that was how I was thinking I'd pay for my tuition. But I had some awesome faith. I remember going into the financial aid office and just feeling enamored with the spirit and the presence of this place. And I'm just like, I'm not going home. I'm not going home. And I just knew that this is where I was supposed to be. I had no money. I went to the financial aid office and I told them, look, I'm here. I don't have any money. I don't know what to do. But I want to be here and I'm going to try my best to stay here. So they gave me grace. They said, okay, Andre, stay. And we'll work things out in the enrollment section of freshman enrollment, which was another week after this particular time when I had gotten there. So I convinced my mom to leave me there with just my Jordans, my And-One shorts, and a white t-shirt. I convinced her to leave me there. She didn't really want to, but I think she knew your son is growing up and he's making decisions. He already got his GED and got out of high school. Now here he is about to go to college. I think it was an exciting time for her, but it was a scary time. It was definitely an exciting time for me. And she left me. And a week later, she came back with some gear, so some clothes and different stuff for me to be able to be comfortable. I went through freshman orientation, no money, and I ended up spending 2 years on this college campus. So that goes to show you that God will work it out if you have faith. Now, don't tell nobody I still owe them a little debt, but that's all right. We're taking care of that right now. So, but God still worked, all right? Because with no money, I shouldn't have ever been allowed to register as a student there. And during freshman orientation, they had this thing back then in 2001. I don't know if they still do now, called cricket camp. And it was a orientation program for all of the freshman students that would come to school. And they rented a charter bus, and we all got on that charter bus, and we went to like this obstacle course where they were teaching us how to work together with others peers to get the job done, because that's what college is. You got to learn how to work together with somebody's study groups and all that kind of stuff. You may swap notes just to finish your assignment, that kind of thing. So they were teaching us how to cooperate with other students. And that's when she walked by. Up to that point, the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen in my life. She was a chocolate-skinned Puerto Rican girl. Chocolate skin. Like my jacket. Beautiful. And still a virgin. I'm 18. I'm still a virgin. And I remember resting my eyes on her, and I was like, you remember that song, Erykah Badu? Love of my life. Yeah, that was playing in my head before it came out. Because that song didn't come out until 2002. I ran into this girl in 2001. And I started following her around the obstacle course, but not like in a creepy way. I didn't want her to see me like I'm stalking her. But I wouldn't be very far from wherever she was, because she was that beautiful to me. And her spirit spoke humility, that she was a humble girl. And I look for that. There are some women and men that are handsome or beautiful, but their spirit is so dirty that you don't want to be nowhere around them. Well, that wasn't her. I read her spirit and I was like, yeah, she is beautiful and she's humble. So after the events of the day, they took us to Cece's Pizza. And I remember there was a young man I saw in the group with her. And because I wasn't ready to approach her, I approached him. And I said, yo, who's that young lady over there? Well, I asked him this when we got to Cece's. And he said, who, her? Oh, her name is, and I won't say her name. And I grew up with her, is what he said. We all went to the same Adventist Academy, Burton Adventist Academy, together. And from first grade all the way to 12th grade. And now we're all here in college at Southwestern Adventist University together. She's a real good friend. Do you want me to introduce you to her? Yeah. I was like, of course. And he did. And I remember just going over there, shaking everybody's hand. I was very nervous. I mean, she was that beautiful. I had never seen anything like it. And I started falling in love. Well, here's the problem. She was not attracted to black boys. The school that she went to, the academy that she went to, was predominantly white people. And so that's what she saw for the whole 12 years of her high school career. So she was attracted to what she saw. She didn't like black guys. But I didn't care. As far as I'm concerned, you were going to be my lady. Okay? I'll pay a penny for your thoughts. Look, I would sing her. I would wine and dine her without the alcohol. I would do everything that I could to get in her mind. And for 3 months of that first semester, I pursued her. A penny for your kiss, I will. I mean, this is the kind of guy. I'm a Casanova. That's who I am. So y'all can have your sports, and you're sweating and you're grunting and you're rubbing up on other dudes. Have at it. That ain't what I am. And so I remember after 3 months of pursuing her, she finally became my girlfriend. I was in my glory. But she would tell me, Andre, I mean, I'm really not sure about this. I'm still not all the way attracted to you, but it was just my strength of pursuit. It was just my persistence that got her attention. So we started dating. And oh boy, you think I was in love with the other young lady who I spent $100 to go and visit. I was deeply, madly in love with this girl. And because now here I am mature, I'm no longer at home. I can do what I want, no chaperone. Here I am thinking about the future, and I'm thinking like, you gonna be my wife, straight up. But there was something crazy about Andre, and because of perhaps the way that I was raised, I thought that the only thing that would matter is love. Or I could say that another way and say that love would pay the bills. Because I wasn't going to class. I wasn't keeping up with my schoolwork. My main course was this young lady. I had a major in this young lady and a minor in this young lady. I wasn't going to class.